Hello and welcome, it's Terry here for Tailored Expressions. I am excited to be back on the channel to share 2 ways to use the Holiday Tags watercolor panels. So let's get started. Before we begin, let's go over the supplies. Here is a quick look at the watercolor panels. There are 5 designs and they do come with 2 in each package. Since I am watercoloring, I like to use my pop-up watercoloring cup along with a handful of TE liquid watercolors. All the colors will get listed down below in the description. A few different watercoloring brushes, inks in a color chocolate, truffle, honey, and Versamark ink, simple strips in reverse, Christmas, along with the coordinating die, linen background stamp, frame and frame dies, foam sticky strips, bleed-proof white, a craft knife, brown markers, twine, some bits and pieces, blending brushes, and I forgot to display it, but the holiday tag dies. Okay, to begin the watercoloring process, I like to add a few drops of each liquid watercolor to a watercolor palette. Then I go in with my glass water droplet and add a few drops of water to each of the colors. There are 5 different options to choose from, and I have selected the first one to watercolor. I'm starting off with the color Sweet Basil and just brushing the color on the leaves of the pine tree. I am not really being too careful about going out of the border because I will use the coordinating dies to turn this into a tag. To prevent the colors from turning muddy, I use my heat tool to help speed up the drying process. Then going in with the color Honey, I added that to the branches of the pine leaves. To create a deeper color interest on the leaves, I added a secondary green color. I am using Brussels sprouts to create some dimension. I heat set that with my heat tool once more. I wanted to add a bit more color to the branches, so I did go back in with Honey liquid color. And using bleed-proof white, I added little specks throughout the panel. And that completes the first panel. I'm going to add some music here so you can continue to watch the process of the second panel. Okay, so I am back. I went ahead and used the coordinating dies and ran that through my die cutting machine. Here you can see all of the panels that I have painted. Now I want to add a little bit more interest to each of the panels. Using my blending brush and my honey ink pad, I am going to blend ink around one of the tags. Then to create more drama, I am also going in with chocolate truffle ink pad and blending around the edges of all of the tags. Okay, so I noticed that it wasn't as dark as I wanted it to be here, so I grabbed a dark brown alcohol marker and just colored around the trim of the smaller tags. To create the background panel, I am inking up linen background stamp with Versamark ink onto Brussels sprouts cardstock. I did have to ink it up a few times to get a good impression. I'm going to use the smaller tags on a card panel instead of using it as a tag. So the coordinating dies do cut out the holes for the tags. I wanted to cover that up. So I found that the bits and pieces that I had in my stash fits really well within that cutout. I used a dark brown marker to color the little circle embellishments that was found in the pack. So off screen, I went ahead and die cut the linen panel out using frame and frame die. I also cut out an A2 size panel out of Toffee Cardstock. Now I am playing around with the placement of the tags, and once I was happy with the layout, I used liquid adhesive to adhere it down to the panel. I used my scissors to trim out the excess. So I really loved the way that it was coming out, and I didn't want to just throw away the little cut off pieces. I decided to add it to the open areas of the panel at a different angle. Then going in with the liquid adhesive once more, I added that to the opening of the tags to help adhere the circle embellishment. Okay, so it's time to do a little bit of surgery to a die cut with my craft knife. I used the same frame and frame die and cut that out of chocolate truffle cardstock. What I am wanting to do is create a thin frame that matches the size of the frame and frame die. So using a ruler and a craft knife, I am going around each side and cutting off about half of the frame off. I ended up with 2 thin frames at the end. I will only use one of it. So here's most of the pieces that I'm using to assemble the card panel. First, I am using my strong magnets to hold the frame in place on the toffee color panel. This is just a great way to make sure that the placement is nice and centered. I adhered it to the center using liquid adhesive. Then I move my magnets to hold the center in place while I add foam strips to the back of the frame. I remove the backing and place that onto the panel. Then I applied liquid adhesive to the thin frame and place that on top. Now for the sentiment. I didn't want anything to take away from the design, so I'm using simple strips in reverse and using the coordinating die to die cut all the sentiments out at once. I love having all the sentiments available at once to pick and choose whichever one calls out to me. I added the sentiment using liquid adhesive and popped the panel onto a top folding card base. For the tags, I also use a coordinating die to die cut the backing out of chocolate truffle cardstock and honey cardstock. This was to give the tag a little bit more structure, especially since the watercolor paper can warp from painting. I glued that to the backside of the tags. I also cut some twine and added that to the top of the tags. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found some inspiration. Please don't forget to follow the channel and like this video to get notified of all future videos. Okay, until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.